Dramatic video shows U.S. agents fast roping onto an oil tanker off of Venezuela's coast, the most aggressive move yet in Washington's pressure campaign against Nicolás Maduro. But behind that public showdown is an even bigger story: the Trump administration's secret day-after plans for what happens if the Maduro regime collapses. Details are coming up. We continue to track the escalating confrontation, of course, between the U.S. and the Maduro regime in Venezuela. And while the dramatic U.S. seizure of a Venezuelan oil tanker grabbed headlines today, we'll have more on that in a few minutes, there's a quieter development happening behind the scenes that isn't getting much attention. And that's a look inside the Trump administration's plans for what happens the day after Nicolás Maduro falls. According to new reporting, the White House has been quietly drafting a series of contingency plans for every possible scenario, specifically a negotiated exit by Maduro, a forced departure triggered by U.S. military action, or perhaps a chaotic collapse from inside the regime itself. Sources who spoke to CNN say these plans are being built through the Homeland Security Council and are being closely held. Only a small group of senior officials has visibility into the details, and they're gaming out what the U.S. should do in the first hours and days after the regime is gone. This includes options for securing the country, stabilizing key institutions, restoring economic functions, and, of course, filling the power vacuum. And while the administration publicly frames its military deployments as counter-drug missions, internally there's acknowledgement that these assets also could support potential action against the regime. That military buildup includes thousands of U.S. troops now staged across the Caribbean, a carrier strike group operating off Venezuela's coastline, and, of course, continued strikes against drug boats that the White House says are linked to the Maduro-controlled military and intelligence services. Officials say planning for a post-Maduro Venezuela is necessary because there's no guarantee that the regime will negotiate in good faith. Maduro has made and, of course, broken multiple agreements over the past decade. Even senior members of the administration are conceding that a diplomatic exit is unlikely at this point. And that's why these day-after plans have intensified. The administration wants to avoid the mistakes of 2003 in Iraq, removing a dictator without a detailed plan for what comes next. And there, of course, as you know, what came next was a mess. Experts quoted in the reporting say the danger is in acting without a blueprint for the political transition that follows. There's also the issue of legitimacy. The Venezuelan opposition, led by Maria Corina Machado and Edmundo Gonzalez, has been preparing its own 100-hour and 100-day plans. Those documents outline how they would rebuild the security services, restart the economy, and restore constitutional order. But it remains unclear just how closely their work aligns with Washington's internal planning. If Machado or Gonzalez take power immediately after Maduro falls, well, recognition by the U.S. would be straightforward. Sanctions relief could begin quickly, and the country could regain access to frozen assets and international financial support. But if a transitional government emerges that includes elements of Chavismo, the political movement that Maduro represents, well, the path becomes more complicated. Recognition decisions would influence sanctions and aid flows and the stability of Venezuela's fragile institutions. Those questions are part of the puzzle the administration is trying to solve before events on the ground make the decisions for them. The reporting also reveals deep divisions inside the Trump administration. Some officials argue for a more aggressive push to accelerate Maduro's departure. Others warn that even limited U.S. involvement could become unpredictable once the regime begins to fracture. Meanwhile, U.S. pressure shows no signs of letting up. Yesterday, U.S. forces seized an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela, a vessel that had been sanctioned for transporting illicit crude tied to foreign terrorist organizations. Dramatic video showed federal agents and Coast Guard personnel fast roping onto the ship from helicopters and executing a seizure warrant with support from the Defense Department. Attorney General Pam Bondi said the tanker had been covertly moving sanctioned Venezuelan and Iranian oil, part of a larger dark fleet that helps Maduro evade sanctions. Maritime data shows roughly a dozen other tankers waiting offshore, with more operating with their transponders switched off. The seizure obviously sends a deliberate message. Washington isn't just pressuring the regime diplomatically or militarily. It's now targeting the financial lifelines that keep Maduro afloat. And the timing is notable. The move came just hours after opposition leader Maria Corina Machado fled the country by boat, a development that U.S. officials reportedly see as opening space for more aggressive actions. Taken together, the quiet White House planning, the military deployments, and now the seizure of a sanctioned oil tanker, all of it points to a confrontation that appears to be entering a new phase. For the Trump administration, the question apparently is not if the Maduro regime falls, but it's what the U.S. does in the hours and days after it happens. All right, coming up next, Zelensky moves closer to presenting a new peace plan to Washington, while escalating clashes on the Thailand-Cambodia border push President Trump to intervene in order to protect the ceasefire that he helped broker. I'll be right back. Hey, Mike Baker here, with a message from our friends at Ridge Wallets. Now, before I switched to a Ridge wallet, I was carrying around one of those giant leather bricks for a wallet. You know what I'm talking about, right? Bulky and falling apart, and honestly, it just hurt my back sitting on it all day long. Now, switching to Ridge was a game changer. And now Ridge just made their best wallet even better with Ridge 2.0. It's slimmer, it's 10% lighter, and even includes AirTag attachments. It's made from premium materials like aluminum, titanium, and carbon fiber. It holds up to 12 cards and cash, in case anybody still carries cash. With over 50 styles to choose from, it's perfect for holiday gifting. For a limited time, Ridge is having their huge holiday sale. Just head over to ridge.com, that's R-I-D-G-E, ridge.com, to get up to 47% off your order. This is by far the biggest discount they've given all year. That's ridge.com for up to 47% off your order during their biggest sale of the year. And after your purchase, well, they'll ask you how you heard about them. Do me a favor, tell them the PDB sent you. Welcome back to the PDB. For weeks, it's been the same diplomatic back and forth. Basically, the U.S. and Ukraine talking and negotiating over a peace plan. And this week was no different, as Ukrainian President Zelensky said a revised 20-point peace plan for the White House is coming soon. Now, the chances that this latest version accomplishes anything is, at best, well, wishful thinking. The key player, the individual that started this war, Vladimir Putin, has yet to back off of any of his hardline demands. He continues to string along the Trump White House in the belief that either he makes further gains on the battlefield or he succeeds in having President Trump pressure Zelensky into a peace deal that accommodates most of the Kremlin's wish list. But Zelensky told reporters that the new framework could, quote, define the parameters for ending the war if Ukraine's red lines are respected. He posted that optimism to X, writing, quote, this week may bring news for all of us. The Ukrainian president spoke with the Trump administration yesterday about reconstruction, economic development, and the kind of post-war future Ukraine imagines it could shape with American help. But the optimistic framing couldn't hide the familiar pattern. Kyiv is once again placing its hopes in a document written largely on its own terms, despite Moscow having already dismissed the 19-point revised framework last week that didn't favor Moscow as much as the original 28-point plan drafted by the White House. Confused? Yeah, a lot of people are. The likelihood that Moscow will now favor a revised version that was prepared by Kyiv is minimal at best. As we previously discussed, President Trump's envoys pushed through another marathon weekend of talks to try to produce a version that Kyiv would sign, only to run into the same wall. The White House wants peace, even if it means Ukraine cede the Donbass region to Russia, while Kyiv says territorial concessions can't be part of the plan. By Monday, Zelensky was signaling that his team was assembling, quote, alternative proposals. From the White House's perspective, this is from their perspective, it's starting to feel like Zelensky's circle keeps rearranging the same pieces on the table and hoping Moscow somehow reacts differently the next time. Now, from Kyiv's perspective, it's looking like the White House is willing to trade away a large chunk of Ukraine and meet Putin's demands in order to say a peace deal has been accomplished. Meanwhile, Putin shows no signs of looking for any off-ramp from his invasion. After Ukraine and several European capitals balked at the original 28-point peace plan from the White House for accepting key Russian demands, the Kremlin returned the favor with a rejection of its own, saying the revised 20-point plan hammered out by U.S. and Ukrainian negotiators failed to meet their demands. So, for now, as we've said many, many times on the PDB, the war grinds on. Okay, coming up in the back of the brief, a tale of Chinese intelligence operations, pandemic fraud, greed, and avarice. The trial of Linda's son and her husband enters its final stage. Prosecutors say the former New York official worked with the Chinese regime to influence decisions and activities within the New York State House, not to mention engaged in fraud and money laundering. I'll have those details when we come back. Hey, Mike Baker here. Let me take just a moment to talk about personal finances. Now, as I suspect you already realize, the holidays are going to be here before you know it. I know. It just snuck up on us, didn't it? And for many families, though, that means excitement, but perhaps a little stress. Look, between gifts and travel and higher prices, it is easy to feel overwhelmed, especially if you're already relying on credit cards to cover the basics. And if that debt is piling up, well, you know what? You're not alone. Now, perhaps if you're a homeowner, you already considered reaching out to our friends over at American Financing, but maybe you hesitated because you don't want to give up your low mortgage rate. Well, that's why the folks at American Financing created what they call the Smart Equity Loan. It's a simple, smart way to get your finances back on track without giving up your low mortgage rate. Unlike a HELOC, which can fluctuate with the market, the Smart Equity Loan offers a fixed rate, so you'll have one predictable monthly payment. It lets you use your home's equity to pay off high-interest debt, free up your cash flow, and still keep your existing mortgage intact. Now, there are no upfront fees. That's important. So to find out if you qualify, just call 866-885-1881. That's 866-885-1881. Or just visit americanfinancing.net/PDB. Hey, Mike Baker here, with a great holiday opportunity from our friends at Birch Gold Group. Now, do you remember that great Burl Ives Christmas tune, Silver and Gold? I guess I'm dating myself. Do you even remember Burl Ives? Anyway, he had that great tune, Silver and Gold. And that's what we're talking about here, because for every $5,000 you purchase between now and December 22nd, Birch Gold will send you an ounce of silver. And if you're not aware of this, silver happens to be up over 60% this year. Here's the thing. When you're talking about protecting your hard-earned assets, it's important to diversify and have a hedge against uncertain times and instability. And that's why I encourage you to consider buying gold from Birch Gold Group. Let Birch Gold help you convert an existing IRA or a 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold. And for every $5,000 you buy, you'll get an ounce of silver for your Christmas stocking or for your kid's stocking. It's actually a great way to teach them about investing and building a smart portfolio. Just text PDB to 989-898 to claim your eligibility for this offer. Again, text PDB to the number 989-898 today, because Birch Gold's free silver with qualifying purchase promotion, well, that ends on December 22nd. Text PDB to 989-898. In today's Back of the Brief, we're returning to a story that we've been tracking for months here at the PDB. The Chinese intel foreign influence and corruption case against former New York gubernatorial aide Linda's son. That trial has now entered its final phase, with closing arguments underway. Son served in senior roles under both Governors Andrew Cuomo and Kathy Hochul, positions that gave her access across state government and direct influence over diplomatic outreach, minority community engagement, and here's where the fraud charges come in, pandemic-era procurement activities. Prosecutors say she used that access for two purposes: to secretly advance the interests of the Chinese government, while never registering, by the way, as a foreign agent, and to enrich her family through kickbacks during the scramble for PPE contracts. Much of the government's case focuses on Son's relationship with officials in China's consulate in New York. According to prosecutors, Son routinely elevated their requests, edited speeches and public statements to align with Beijing's preferences, and even blocked Taiwanese representatives from events and outreach. In one message introduced at trial, Son allegedly bragged to Chinese officials that Governor Hochul was, quote, much more obedient than Andrew Cuomo, adding that she could get Hochul to record cultural messages and appearances with little pushback. Prosecutors argue this was influence work on behalf of a foreign government. Well, what else would you call it? Carried out from inside the highest levels of New York State's executive branch. In the simplest of terms, look, from the Chinese regime's perspective, she was working as an agent of influence. They weren't giving her money and gifts because they liked her. She was a classic target, frankly, for Chinese intel, a first-generation Chinese American in a position of influence with access to persons of interest. The Chinese intel apparatus uses a wide range of espionage tools around the world to gather information, influence policymaking, monitor targets of interest, and work to suppress individuals or organizations that the Chinese regime considers hostile to its interests. Their efforts encompass everything from recruited assets to agents of influence, witting and non-witting cooperative contacts, and more. Linda Sun would have to be incredibly moronic not to have known that she was advancing the Chinese regime's interests and objectives while accepting remuneration from them. And the regime would have considered her as an important asset in helping to advance their agenda in New York and hopefully beyond. She was able to put herself in positions of responsibility with 2 different New York governors and to brag about her influence to individuals within the Chinese consulate. So perhaps we could rule out that moron scenario. And the authorities say the work on behalf of the Chinese regime wasn't Sun's only questionable or illegal activity. Another major element of the case centers on PPE procurement during the height of the pandemic. According to investigators, Sun steered business toward companies connected to her husband, Christopher Hu, who is a co-defendant in the case. In return, the couple allegedly received kickbacks that funded luxury homes, expensive cars, and high-end personal spending far beyond their salaries. Financial records shown in court depict a pattern of shell companies, wire transfers, and cash movements that prosecutors say amount to a classic pay-to-play operation. Of course, Sun's defense told a very different story during the trial. That's shocking. They argue her engagement with Chinese officials was part of her normal responsibilities. Nothing to see here, just outreach to immigrant communities, engagement with cultural groups, and routine communication with foreign diplomats. They say that obedient text message that we referenced earlier, well, that one was just taken out of context. And regarding the fraud, well, the defense team argues that the PPE contracts and financial arrangements were just legitimate business ventures, improperly folded into a sprawling federal case. Regardless, the prosecution insists that the evidence is clear and points to foreign influence, self-dealing, and corruption. And importantly, they argue that Sun's access and her willingness to use it on behalf of the Chinese regime posed a national security risk. The case will be heading to the jury in the coming days, and we'll keep you updated. And that, my friends, is the President's Daily Brief for Thursday, the 11th of December. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. And finally, we hope you'll take the time to check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel. No surprise, you can find that by going to YouTube and searching at President's Daily Brief. I'm Mike Baker, and I'll be back later today with the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment, a really positive, nice, and kind comment. That would be appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our daily updates.